Hi guys, it's Simon here, and today we're having a great guest, Ingvar Ronde, a Malt Whisky yearbook, not only author but also the editor and publisher. This is what all the media tells about you, and I'm curious. I'm really curious about how you are doing those books. So where do you take the main theme for your book, for example? How you do that?
Well, first of all, Simon, thanks for having me and have this chat. Um, the thing with the Malt Whisky book, I mean, it started 20 years ago, and it was all due to my interest in malt whiskey, which started even 40 years earlier. But I was missing this every day, every year, a book about what happened in the world of whiskey. And so that's why I started doing the Malt Whisky book. And it was quite a struggle in the beginning because I was completely unknown in the world of whiskey. And after a few years, people recognized, yes, enthusiasts recognized this is what we've been missing. And also the producers found that this is a book that we can buy for our brand ambassadors, for our salespeople, and for our tour guides. So I became more and more well known amongst the producers to start with in Scotland, of course, because to be honest, Simon, I mean, we always tend to go to Scotland, don't we? Even though the world of whiskey has grown unproportionally in the last 10, 15 years, most of us, we started our interest in Scotland. So I try to go to Scotland at least 3 or 4 times every year, a week at a time, revisit distilleries and get all the information I can get from the distillers.
But how you come up with the main theme for the book, right? Once you see the whiskey legends, the icons of whiskey, trailblazers, so how you go with that?
That's a good question. Every year I try to invite people who can tell us a bit more of the personal aspects of whiskey. And up until now, to be honest, that's a very good question. I've always tried to look at the producers. I wanted whiskey icons. I wanted master blenders. I wanted all the illuminaries of the whiskey industry to give me their perspective of the Scotch whiskey industry. Now, for the first time in the Malt Whisky Yearbook 2025, I invited people who work as influencers, as YouTubers, as bloggers, to give me their view because they are actually working for the ones like us, the consumers. So let them give us their perspective. How are the producers actually doing when they're doing the work for us? Because we are buying the whiskey. So that's a, and I'm a bit amazed myself. Why didn't I think of that before? But now for the first time, we really take the consumer perspective of how the producers are doing.
And do you collect all the data by yourself, or it is something for someone from the distillery who is giving you information about the production, the process itself, or you are just on your own, going to the distillery, talk to the managers and say, can you
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more from my book?
Let's be absolutely honest, Simon, because people used to ask me, they came to me with questions. Could you or anyone in your staff answer this? I don't have any staff. It's just me. It has been just me for 20 years. An enthusiast, just like you and all the readers. And I really enjoy being in control. I'm a control freak, let's be honest. I like being in control of the book. So I have all the contacts with the distilleries, with the blenders, with the distributors. And it's a hard work, but I really, that was my thought from the beginning. It should be just me, and I do it from a consumer perspective, from an enthusiast perspective, because that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. And how many distilleries have you visited in your life?
Well, the thing is, I mean, it's hard work to travel around the world. You know yourself, there are distilleries in most of the countries in the world today. So, of course, I've been to Japan, I've been to Taiwan, to India. Then most of all, I try to revisit all the Scottish distilleries because, as I mentioned before, this is where most of us tend to go back to. That's the core of our interest. So I mean, I've been walking around distilleries probably 600-700 times, and some of them I've been to 10 times. But whenever I revisit, I always learn something new, and that's the thrill of being interested in whiskey. There's always some new tweak that you can pick up.
Yeah, I can imagine. But when we are talking about the discussing with the people from the whiskey industry, you prefer to have the online interviews or you prefer to go face to face, discuss a little bit more, new something new, and how you do it for your book normally
Uh,
or
uh,
the
uh,
most usually.
no, I see what you mean, and I absolutely prefer face to face because let me take you back to the terrible year of COVID 2020. We were all stuck in our home countries. We couldn't travel. So when I finally could go back to Scotland in autumn in 2021, I remember, I so absolutely remember when I stepped out to the first distillery of that week-long visit, and I could hear them mashing in. I could smell it. I could feel the heat of the stills, and I could talk to the distiller. And I realized I had missed it so very much, that eye-to-eye contact that you were speaking about. So that's very important to me.
The same for me. I'm trying to be in Scotland twice a year.
Yeah.
It is not every single year, but still, I'm very into going into the
Yeah.
Scotland, see
So
the
you know
distilleries.
exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
And when you told me the information about, I want to feel you want to see the mash tun, I want to feel how the machine works, how the steel
Absolutely.
is working. Yeah, I know the points,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this
Good.
is something in my mind all the time to be there.
Yeah.
And you're writing a lot about whiskey, but do you drink it?
What an extraordinary question. Yes. Yes. Yes, I do. But your question is quite interesting because I have realized in the past, because my first travel to Scotland was in the summer of 1980, and that's almost 45 years ago. And I went to Strathila, Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, a couple of the distilleries that were open to the public at that time. So that was my first travel. But I have realized in the past 10 years that whiskey to me has become less and less about what I have in the glass and more about the situation, the people I'm enjoying it with, the social context. That has become so much more interesting to me. So, I mean, if there is a new whiskey coming out from the distillery and everyone is talking about it, everyone is trying to get their hands on that bottle, I don't care very much about that these days. I'm happy to drink these extraordinary whiskies. If I miss out, I'm I don't care because it's so much more about the social context for me.
So this is like very different, very mature understanding the business because you are in the business industry for a very, very long time. And I believe that we are going to the same place, drinking whiskey and being in the industry. But of course, it is better to drink better whiskey than the regular one.
Of
But
course, you're right.
of course, but when you are drinking with people, it is going on the background more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to add also that I'm more intrigued when a distillery launches a new core range that is available to every consumer because it's quite a low price. I'm more intrigued by that because then I can try it again and again. I can buy I can buy more bottles. I can recommend it to friends of mine. So I'm more intrigued about that than a hugely rare 80-year-old Glenlivet or something, because to be honest, you and I can't afford that anyway.
That's true.
Yeah.
But what are your biggest challenges in creating your book? The biggest one that you have encountered in your career?
I have to say, in recent years, the number of new distilleries and keeping track of them, that is the biggest challenge. I mean, it's not just distilleries popping up all over the world. It's about, I mean, Scotland. We had Kilchoman in 2005 and Dathmill. Since then, 52 new distilleries have been opened up in Scotland. Nobody anticipated that. So I have to say that was just a strike of luck that I decided to do the first yearbook in 2005. But it was really the perfect starting point of a yearbook, because since then, in 20 years, so much has happened in the world of whiskey, in Scotland and all over the world.
And what are the new distilleries that you are that caught your attention, and you think that might be something great for me from your end? Which one, or which ones, or none?
No, a few. I mean, let's start in Scotland. Of the ones that has been opening up in the past 10 years, I feel very much that the ones from the western parts of Scotland, I'm thinking Ardnamurchan, I'm thinking Torabhaig, I'm thinking Rassay, Ardnahoe, all extraordinary distilleries with very young spirit, young whiskey, but still stuff. If we're broadening our picture into the rest of the world, so much amazing whiskies have been released from India, from Taiwan, from Australia. And let's look at Europe. I have to speak of Swedish distilleries. I'm a Swede, for God's sake. So we have a bunch of them here. And in the Nordics overall, we have wonderful distilleries in England, and I'm very happy that I've managed to bring in at least 4 distilleries from Poland. And I met a couple of the Polish distillers at last year's Whiskey Live in Warsaw, and I had some great chats with them, and really happy to see them take their place in the whiskey community. Absolutely.
So if we are getting to the Polish market, then I should ask you the question. You are a regular person in the Whiskey Life Warsaw, not
Yes.
to mention 1 year, but what do you like and dislike about the Warsaw itself in Poland? Could you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, I've been so lucky to have come to Whiskey Live Warsaw. I think I'm going now for the 7th time, and I'm a regular at the whiskey show in London. That's where I usually go. So I think Warsaw is on. That's the second most visited whiskey show I've ever been to, and I love coming back. The venue is fantastic. The Legia Warsaw Stadium.
The stadium.
One thing, I'm not a cigar smoker, but I love that the ones who love to enjoy a cigar with a whiskey, they can just step outside and look at the pitch, at the field, and enjoy their cigar and drink whiskey. No, but I really feel that the Warsaw and the Polish whiskey drinkers, they are so knowledgeable and they're so curious to know more about every new distillery that pops up. So that has intrigued me from the first time I was at the Whiskey Live Warsaw 7, 8 years ago, and I know, I mean, you're keen whiskey drinkers, and you, but especially the knowledge that you have and the curiosity about new whiskies. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yes, these are us. But maybe do you remember any Polish independent bottlers from your end, or their or the dram that you have drank and you remember something bottled by the Polish people?
I would like to point out someone special there. It's when I go these 2-3 days, when I go to Warsaw every year, it's more about the general public, and it's about the interest and the enthusiasm that you have. So no, I wouldn't like to point out someone special.
Fair enough.
Thanks.
And I'll get back to the production, to the business, and I'm going to ask you a question about the future. How do you see the technology, the AI, everything which is coming to the distillery and to the maturation process or any other processes which are in the distillery, the modern distilling methods, how they are impacting the future of whiskey? What do you think about it?
I think right now we're at a crossroad where, and it's very peculiar because we have all these modern technology about the blockchain, and we have AI, and quite a few distilleries have adopted that. But at the same time, if we look at the new distilleries in Scotland, at least 10 or 15 of the new ones, they're looking back. They are searching. So the future for them is going back to heritage barley, going back to floor malting, going back to direct fired stills, looking for all the yeast strains, brewer's yeast instead of distiller's yeast. So, and that's quite interesting. Now, the problem for these new distilleries is that they have to sacrifice yield. I mean, if you use Golden Promise barley that was used all over Scotland 50, 60 years ago, you realize that you will only get 300 liters of spirit per ton barley instead of the 420 that you get from modern barley. But they're willing to do that. But at the same time, we as consumers, we have to be willing to pay a bit more to enjoy these whiskies when they become mature in 5-10 years from now. And what's even more interesting is you might expect that, okay, these are a few of the small distilleries, and they will do this, but we have a few of the bigger producers. I'm thinking of Suntory Global Spirits, who own Lafroig, Bowmore, Glengear, etc., Auchintosh, and in Scotland. They have recently installed more washbacks at their distilleries, not to produce more whiskey, but to increase the fermentation time. And why? Because they want to replicate how a Bowmore tasted in the 60s and the 70s, and not how Bowmore tastes today. So, and this is a huge company, as we know, Suntory, but they're willing to do this to recreate something that maybe has gone lost over the decades. Where a lot of whiskies today are more and more, they taste the same. They're more generic. But they realize that we could go back to how whiskey tasted in the old days, at Lafroig, at Bowmore. And for a huge company like Suntory to do that, I applaud them. I mean, that's extraordinary.
Yeah. That's true. And with this great thought, I'm going to end this interview. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Hopefully, we're going to back to that old good days of whiskey with all the distilleries doing in the old-fashioned way,
Wouldn't
not with
that be
the,
wonderful?
not going with the AI. Hopefully, we're going to see each other on in Warsaw during Whiskey Live Warsaw.
I'm counting on that.
And thank you very much and have fun.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks.